My wife said, you really need to get some help. So we ended up, I hesitated just because I hadn't gone that route. It's one thing to have employees I worked for Marriott for a couple of years and other businesses, and it's one thing to have employees, but your own, it's a whole different issue. And if the work is coming in, when you hire a person, they're actually a revenue generator, not just an expense. And he said, every time that I've hired a new person, I've found that my business increases because I'm able to do more of the prospecting and customer service and stuff. So, and I found that to be true.
Welcome to the Clear Brand Marketing Podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. I'm your host, Alexander. And today I'm talking to Scott Hauer. He's the founder and president of Moss Rock Solutions, a software development company specializing in building custom software solutions and integrations for clients in many industries around the U.S. A couple examples. They've got a solution built for district attorneys, a solution for family resource centers, and for disaster cleanup company that's actually helping to clean up after Hurricane Helene. Welcome, Scott.
Alexander, good to see you.
Okay. Good to see you too. Glad to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. I'm looking forward to having the conversation.
Absolutely. So let's start with how you got into what you're doing. You founded the company, software development. How did you get into this?
I've had a lifetime aversion to tedious repetition.
All right.
So when I got my first college, which was in the 80s, I was able to. They would give students a free account on the the school's computer system, which was text-based, and I just hated rewriting papers, but I didn't mind editing them. So they had WordPress, not WordPress. What is it? It wasn't Word. What was the other big? I forgot it. They had a word processor on this big mainframe, and it would revolutionize my writing. Yeah, my degree was in psychology, and I had to write a lot, and I could actually have somebody type it in for me, and then I would do the editing. And I made all A's on my papers.
Wow.
And then after college, I got a Macintosh SE, and I anything that was tedious, I would just automate, And I got really good at Microsoft products and the macros and things like that. And then I was selling computers for a while, and I was suddenly dumped like 900 educational clients, and I was struggling to keep up. Somebody handed me a product called FileMaker Pro 2.0 and said, hey, this has helped me out. And I stayed up all night and wrote my first quote management system. And it revolutionized what I did. I was able to take quotes on the phone and give them an estimate. And if they called back with changes, I used to have to write them down on these pads, that had multi-copies. We didn't have the carbon paper. We were more advanced than that.
Okay.
But, and so that was just how it started. And then eventually a client of mine hired me to rewrite their program. It was the Alabama iBank. And they gave me some time to do that. And I also did I had been in restaurant management. I had a lot of management experience. So I worked there 11 years, really doing everything under the sun, from software design to regulatory compliance. Worked on a group that mitigated the impact of HIPAA on eye and tissue and organ banking, but also, did presentations. And anyway, it was a lot of fun. But eventually I left when my bishop asked if I would consider helping him manage 1,100 churches in East Africa. And so I hung out my shingle as a developer. I had a few clients already, and was picked up by a friend of mine who owned a much bigger development company, and gradually built my business as I worked for him, which he was expecting and encouraging me to do. And then at some point, added a developer here, a developer there. We're currently at 9 developers and a few part-timers and some contractors. But I hung out my shingle. in 2007, and I needed to get a business license, and I had no fancy name that I could think of. It was very uncreative, and so I named it Scott Howard Consulting.
That works.
But as we grew, I really wanted a name that took the focus off of me and emphasized that we were a team of really gifted developers with creative development skills. And so we tried a gazillion names, and Moss Rock Solutions kept coming up. Moss Rock was a nature area that was not anything official, but it was where if you were a rock climber, they had great sandstone bouldering area. And so it's always dear to my heart. And I came up with that name, and it tested really well with our clients. It's
All
fairly
right.
generic, easily definable, and you know, just had a lot of good imagery to it. So that's what we are now, Moss Rock Solutions.
Okay.
Right.
Well, so that's a good summary. I've got a lot of questions there. So first question is, you're a rock climber. How often do you rock climb?
I don't do it very much anymore. I did it avidly through college and afterwards, including some granite up in the Carolinas and, just around some lead climbing. Never out west. Always dreamed of it.
Yeah.
Done a lot of hiking though out west, but I've wanted to get back into it, so I'm hoping eventually. I try to keep in shape so that I'll can at least not embarrass myself if I rock climb again.
Yeah. Well, and you run as well, don't you?
I do. I do.
All right.
That
That's definitely where you should
keeps
do
me
it.
fit and keeps me moving.
Keeps the mind clear too,
It
I find.
does. Definitely. This morning I ran in the dark at first, and it's just I love running in the dark and then up into the sunrise.
All
It's
right.
so peaceful. That's a good way to start the day.
Yeah, the world's kind of quiet at that point.
Yes, very
Hmm.
much.
So psychology to sales to kind of, it sounds like the opportunity was there. It wasn't necessarily one of these, I have to go found a company. It was like, I want to do some of that development. So you kind of self taught yourself development.
Really?
That's what I'm hearing.
I did. And I'd always been involved in technology. Every job I was in the restaurant business for 8.5 years,
Wow.
and I have a I have an insatiable curiosity about just about everything, which has gotten me into trouble. But it's also I've found myself in some interesting scenarios following that curiosity, including once I've found myself behind a line of guards in Moscow during a state funeral. And I didn't mean to. I just was curious where this alley led, and I looked one way, and I could see Red Square, and I looked the other way, and I could see a line of soldiers guarding people from getting to the Red Square. And I tiptoed back into the alley and got out of there.
Wow.
This was in '82.
So
But
that's an interesting time to be over in Moscow. What were you doing over there?
we were I went to Birmingham Southern, which unfortunately recently closed. It's a private college, liberal arts college in Birmingham, and the business. My mother was taking night classes at the business school, and they always had the best trips. They would do these month-long trips, and they were going to the Soviet Union. My mother heard about it and decided she wanted to go, but she'd never traveled overseas, and she asked if I wanted to go. And we were always big travelers, so I was excited, and it was really an amazing trip. We were considered a VIP group, so we were treated very well, given a lot of freedom. I walked around with a friend of mine and just saw some cool things. But that was one of the interesting General Suslov, who of Poland, who had died, and he was getting a state funeral. And people could be outside the guard line, but not inside it.
And you had accidentally ended up inside it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because they didn't post any guards at the entrance to
At
the
the
alley,
alley.
so I ended up behind them.
And all right, in the Soviet Union, that's one of those
What?
you don't mess around,
No, you don't.
in places like that. Okay, so you have this insatiable curiosity. So is that how you initially, walk me through this psychology to sales?
So, I when I was working restaurants, I always would express curiosity with the cash register or this different systems which were developing at that time. And so as a result, I would usually get assigned to do something. I was in wastewater treatment for a while before, kind of in between restaurant things. And I got tagged with installing Peachtree accounting on DOS.
Hmm.
And I was not a DOS guy. I was not an accounting person. I had to read a book on accounting, and you know, so I always gravitated toward technology. And then I sold computers for 4 years, and that's how I got into really real development. And then when the iBank hired me, they paid for me to go get some more training, work with a few consultants, and so I learned enough to do some pretty decent stuff.
Wow. So where else has I mean, it sounds like a lot of your journey is kind of driven by this curiosity, if I'm hearing you right, kind of curious about computers, and so you kind of get assigned some of that in the restaurants, and then curious about sales, and then in iBank that you're just wanting to learn, and they go and they kind of pay for that. So where else has your curiosity taken you?
um, that's a good question. Yeah, a lot of it. I read a lot.
Okay.
I'm fascinated with history. I traveled in Africa for about 5 years. That's what caused me to hang out my shingle, and have been in many places in East Africa. We got held up by rebels in Democratic Republic of Congo one night, which we shouldn't have been there one night, but somebody screwed up and didn't meet us at the border. Thankfully, it was just a real miracle that they let us go. It's not what they would normally do, and so we were very fortunate.
Wow. What were you doing
um,
over there?
I was working with my bishop. He was given oversight of about 1,100 churches in East Africa, and we had a transition in our church, and he needed help. So my wife and I did logistics. My wife mainly, we organized events, and I kind of managed it over on the field, and she managed it over here. So at the same time, we were also going to Brazil, working with young people in inner city Recife, which is in northeast Brazil. And so that was fascinating. I tend
Wow.
to study the places I go because I'm fascinated. I want to learn more, and um, yeah, different technologies I've studied for the fun of it, and you know, history. I love history. Um, Early church history, ancient history, modern history, Enlightenment, Renaissance history.
Yeah.
Just and it's just purely a hobby, so I don't publish anything. I just sometimes get into really fascinating conversations because of it.
I'm sure. So you mentioned your bishop a couple times. What religion are you?
Christian. We Our denomination is the Charismatic Episcopal Church. We're
Okay.
small in the U.S. but bigger overseas. Have a lot of churches in Africa, the Philippines, and Europe, and so we're believe in the Bible that it's relevant today. That Jesus is the Son of God and paid for our salvation through His death and resurrection. So it's I'd say it's stands in line with the traditional
Yeah.
understanding of the Christian faith. So it's
Okay.
exciting.
Yeah. That's
My
awesome.
wife,
That's cool. I was
yeah,
trying to piece together what, because the denominations each kind of have their own organizational structure
never.
and terms. And I was like, it doesn't quite sound like Catholic, doesn't quite sound like Orthodox, doesn't quite sound like LDS. I'm
No,
glad I asked. I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
it's pretty diverse. And my wife and I have always worked. We ran a children's ministry that did dance and performance out in the streets, and we did it in
Hmm.
Brazil. We've done it in all over the southeastern U.S., out west. We would work with other churches too. I mean, at one time, I think we had 7 different churches from different denominations: Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Assembly of God. Just had youth who we knew through relationships.
Yeah.
Did a lot of really cool things.
So what impact has the church, your faith had on your business journey?
Um, at times, we've made decisions based on a sense of calling, like hanging out my shingle. When my bishop came to me and said, "Would you consider helping me with these churches?" And my job at the iBank was a very good job, very good, well-paying, really great benefits, and it was a big leap of faith. And my wife and I just felt through prayer and consulting others and weighing our options that was seemed a door opening.
Mm.
We took the leap of faith. It was tight. We have 4 kids, and they were still young. Um, and so, but God provided. We got opportunities. A friend of mine who had a development company um, asked if I would be a subcontractor for him, and that really did fill in a good deal as I built my business. So it was very timely. And so we were used to seeing those kind of timely provisions in our lives. Sometimes it makes you nervous.
Yeah.
So, we just finished 5 years of caring for my mother-in-law who had dementia. So she passed away about a month ago, and
Oh, wow.
so it's kind of a new phase of our life. But that's another, in some ways, a faith journey because it's a hard journey. If anyone who's done that, and there's a lot of people who've been through it.
Yeah.
So, but it taught us a lot and brought us into, uh, friendships with people that we might not have met otherwise. So each phase has brought its own benefits and challenges. And so I
Yeah.
think being grounded in faith helps navigate those challenges. The business has had ups and downs, mainly up, but we've had some downs. Right now, a lot of our clients are cutting back because of the economy and the elections, wanting to wait and
Hmm.
see. I hear this a lot of even government work. We have some government clients, but even they're kind of holding off on grant awards and things like that in their particular industries. So we're
So
just.
are they waiting to see who wins, or what's the reason for that?
I think that people are uncertain where the economy is going. That's what we're being
Hmm.
told,
Okay.
and so a lot of them are slowing down work or not starting new projects. Although we have gotten some new projects, so
Yeah.
that's good. But thankfully, we have a good base of and a diverse clientele.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does. There does seem to be a lot of concern, and honestly, I don't really probe them to ask which
Mm.
outcome they think is going to be most helpful. I think they're waiting to see what the economic indicators do.
Got it. So it's less about which candidate, it's more about we're paying attention to the economy,
Yes.
and the elections are kind of a point of turmoil in
Mhm.
the economy, and so we're going to see how they impact things. But the indicator is actually the economy.
Yes, we have
Mm.
several who are in the defense industry. We have several who are in law and other government. They work with other government organizations. Um, so that's their bread and butter. And so a lot of those are um, halting on grant awards too, and
Uh huh.
they think at least until the election. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But this has happened before. It just seems more extreme, kind of like the whole political, you know, environment now. It just
Hmm.
everyone seems to get more and more contentious and extreme. So
Yeah. Are
we
you
just.
familiar with Ray Dalio?
Yes, Principles, his book. I've read some of
Principles.
it. Hmm.
Yes. So he has a book uh, called Principles of the Changing World Order.
Hmm.
Because he's an investor. So for the listeners who don't know about who he is, he's an investor. He started an investment company in the 70s, lost all his money early 80s during the turmoil then, and then decided, well, there's got to be a way to tell what to invest in. So he started looking through history. What should I invest in at what times and in what locations was kind of the driving force there. And he, over the years, basically built an algorithm that tells them, based on these factors of what's going on, here's what you'd invest in. Well, he noticed that you can also see the ups and downs of countries and see the phases, that there's a cycle that countries go through, as he was doing all this research to discover what to invest in. So the book, The Principles of the Changing World Order, talk about the other elements. Not He doesn't get into what to invest in. That's kind of their secret sauce over at Bridgewater. But he does go through the other elements: education, and the economy, and debt, and all. I mean, pretty much anything you can think of are kind of covered in these cycles. And I bring him up because what you're talking about there, the cycle that we're in right now, that he says that we're in, is one where the classically in the cycle, people move from the middle to the extremes on both sides. And so you see this, and that's what we're witnessing. We see this slow movement where the middle is kind of vanishing, and the people who lean right are moving further right, and people who lean left are leaning further left. So just not to take over the conversation here, but what you're observing is spot on with what he's observed, and he's actually posting right now. He released the book a few years ago, and if you follow him on LinkedIn, he posts updates every couple weeks right now, because things are changing fast enough that he feels like we need to have these updates every couple weeks. And he'll say, this is where I think what's happening. This is where I think we're going. This is what we would want to see happen to for things to lead to the best outcome. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I just wrote a to-do to check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, and with your interest in history and politics impacting the economy and impacting businesses, like I think everybody should check out the Principles of the Changing World Order. There's a lot of different ways that folks kind of talk about the cycles, but his is just pure data, which I appreciate. He doesn't. It's not economic theories. It's just, this is what happened.
Right. I've always subscribed to the Wall Street Journal, partially because I just feel like people who are making money don't really. I mean, they care who wins because it does affect them, but they're looking for things that are not driven as much through ideology, but driven how they can maintain and participate and succeed in an economy, whichever one it is. So,
yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned in business is sometimes things that I don't like actually are good for the business. So my ideology can't be the only factor there. So, coming back over here to you though, one of the things I'm curious about is going from basically a freelancer, is how you started, to a business, to hiring people. Walk me through that process there.
Well, I was starting to do too many all-nighters because I had enough work and clients who, I just had too many projects, really. And my wife said, you really need to get some help. So we ended up, I hesitated just because I hadn't gone that route. It's one thing to have employees I worked for Marriott for a couple of years and other businesses, and it's one thing to have employees, but your own, it's a whole different issue. And so I finally hired a guy who had graduated with a CS degree, computer science degree, very smart young man, the son of a good friend of ours. And he was a manager at Chick-fil-A. And he really didn't want the risk of working for just me, a one person, although he trusted me. I said, well, let's try it part-time. And so he did, and he did extremely well and worked for us for a number of years. And it really helped, and he did a great job, and it really lifted the burden. And this other friend who I was working with, helping him as a subcontractor, he had made the comment that, if the work is coming in, when you hire a person, they're actually a revenue generator, not just an expense. And he said, every time that I've hired a new person, I've found that my business increases because I'm able to do more of the prospecting and customer service and stuff. So, and I found that to be true. So he eventually went full-time, and then I hired another part-timer, and he went full-time, and then I hired another one, a student intern. Well, he was a paid intern, and he worked through until he went to graduate school and got a job. So, so we've just taken that one step at a time, and we've been very fortunate. We've just really had great employees, really gifted developers, people who do our social media marketing. Actually, it's our daughter. She's part-time. She was a professional dancer, but she's also very, very gifted artistically, and she's just done some fun little things she puts out for us. And really, most of our business comes to us through word of mouth, recommendations from clients.
That's
So
always good.
yeah, so definitely, we loved the website y'all built for us when we changed our name a few years ago. That really, um, y'all really nailed it. I think, we had gone through the story brand process, and then y'all helped us think through how to translate that into visual presentation. And I just really thought y'all did a good job. So need to do some updates to it eventually, but
Yeah, anytime.
I'll be calling you then. I'm glad to hear you're
Yeah.
doing that. Um, but
So did you
yeah,
ever feel like you overhired? Like you maybe
uh,
you went a little too far?
no, because we were very conservative.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, the only time we've ever had to lay somebody off was when when some of these clients tightened their belts a bit, and I had one employee who just had gotten into a lot of stuff that was important but not billable,
Mm-hmm.
and so we just really had to cut somebody. But thankfully, it worked out really well. He got a really good job, and we still keep in touch with him, and he still sometimes comes on board. And
Ah,
the
that's good.
the former employee, I mean, the current employer doesn't mind him helping us out, so he still at night
Yeah.
sometimes does support for us, and we maintain a really good relationship with him. So we've been
Nice.
very fortunate in that way.
Yeah.
So
So how do you know when it's time to hire? Are you looking at certain metrics like revenue? Are you looking at time? How do you know that it's not going to be an extra person?
um, usually it's the capacity. We're all working at capacity, and
Mm-hmm.
then we have some looming opportunities that have a good chance of being won, and we know we're going to need help. If like a number of our hires were during times when we had a lot of business and customers kept coming to us, um, and so we knew we had some lead time, and so I would bring somebody on board. So I mean, I've one of our developers was helped run a data center for AT&T, and then he had become in his retirement a contractor with HP, and then finally retired, got bored, and through uh, a friend and his wife and her heard that we were hiring, and he decided he wanted to do it. We put him through some training, and he's become one of our, probably busiest developers. He does most of the
Wow.
support for our district attorneys. We have a case management solution, and some of the family resource centers and some other pieces of software he just does a great job with. Our clients love him. Whenever I do client visits and I take him with us, he's like a rock star. I'll walk in with Tim, and they're like, Tim, he's here. And
Yeah,
he's helped so many people.
that's
It's really
awesome.
rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like you're using capacity as a primary metric, but you also have a certain amount of each person's time is billable. So
Yeah.
you make sure that the revenue's there before hiring. Is that part of how you make sure that you're doing it right?
That's the way we've done it. Sometimes I know that sometimes we took a risk where we knew that it would cut significantly into profit, but and with the hope of some good prospects that looked like they were coming to us, or some clients with big projects.
Okay.
So you know, I'm risk averse like everybody else, probably a little more so than a lot of entrepreneurs. Maybe that's why we're not bigger, but we do a good job where clients like us and we have great relationships with them. So I think it's
Yeah.
I like doing things that our clients really enjoy using and serving
Mm-hmm.
them well. And come out of within the restaurant business, it's a service industry. Seems like almost everything I've done to some degree has been a service industry or a service need. So
Yeah.
we handle it the same way.
Well, and the reason I'm asking is I do think, uh, I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when they're small, are that risk averse. In my experience, because I've done thousands of sales calls, and they're almost all with CEOs of companies of a variety of sizes, and I think that the larger companies tend to have people who are more risk averse. And this is just my observation. I can't say for sure, whether it's completely true or not, but it seems that the smaller companies are the ones that tend to be less risk averse. They hear something like what you'd said earlier. Oh, every employee is actually revenue generator. They
Right,
stop there, and then they go hire a bunch of employees thinking this is going to make me money.
right,
And then they're too
right,
far. They go too far.
right,
So that's
right.
why I do like hearing kind of the risk averse method. How do I do this without putting the
Sure.
business at risk? You know?
Yeah. And my wife and I, both of us, have been in ministry for a long time. So, we're very focused on people and helping them. And I think that factors into the way we run the business. It probably makes us a little more conservative. My wife is much more the entrepreneur than I am, but she also
Mm-hmm.
is very conscious of being fiscally sound.
Yeah.
And so with our staff, we've always, we've had times where it was tight and we tightened our belts,
Mm-hmm.
we might have taken a hit ourselves in our own, what we take out of the business, but only for a little while. And then things would come back. And generally we've really maybe only twice ever had to do that. But we just feel a responsibility to the people we hire.
Yeah.
We're not as cutthroat, I think, as some might be, which doesn't say it's always bad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, I've seen over the years that people are resilient and often find better situations. So I don't want to, if I have to make a cut to help everybody else, you know, be paid, then we'll have to do that. But thankfully, like I said, we've really only had to do that once or through attrition. A
Mm-hmm.
couple of times we've had people leave that we really didn't have the we could make it without them. They were valuable and their work was valued, but we could spread it around,
Yeah.
and then hire later as
So
business
that's kind
grew.
of a more natural way where they're leaving on their own, and
Yes.
then you just hold off on hiring for a bit.
Right. Yes.
So do you have like a certain, profit metric that you don't want to dip below? I think, and part of what I'm asking is I think a lot of entrepreneurs have had to cut back themselves. I've had to do that sometimes on what, I'm taking out of the business, but I don't hear a lot of folks talk about that, So what, are you still maintaining a certain level of profit when you do that, or a certain amount of money in the bank account, or, how do you process that kind of a decision?
Yes. It's sort of all of the above. I mean, we, uh, my wife, who's our COO and project manager, she's very good with numbers. She watches them very closely. She's always learning. She's currently going through a program by the Small Business Administration called Thrive. It's a free program, and it just helps small businesses improve. It's one of their many,
Mm-hmm.
many excellent programs. I'd highly recommend, if you have anyone starting a business, their SCORE program at the Small Business Administration. It's where you are paired with a mentor who was usually in retirement but ran their own businesses and now just enjoy mentoring people. That really helped us take the plunge, especially when
Really?
yeah, it helped us because we had a guy who was a serial entrepreneur. He built big communications companies. I think his biggest was 400 million.
Wow.
And so he was a bit at a scale that was way beyond ours, but he had started businesses over and over, and he had a lot of practical knowledge, and that helped. And this is a diverse group of small businesses that are in this Thrive program, and that's helped us. But we have we're part of a group of colleagues who are businesses just like us. They build on some of the same platforms, but we compare notes. We're geographically separated. We try not to compete with one another, although we have some guidelines for if opportunities come that we just work together. But some of them are very disciplined with their numbers and their metrics, and we've learned a lot from them. But I don't think we're quite that disciplined. Uh,
Hmm.
but my wife does look at the numbers very closely and continually keeps her spreadsheets up to date, so we can see, like, one of the big tools we learned from Michael Hyatt. I don't know if you're familiar
Hmm.
with him. He has the Full Focus is his organization. They have this, that they just coach small businesses. And one of the things we learned was this, I think, the 16 work cash flow. That's 16 week, and it's a spreadsheet that you put your numbers in, and then it shows you where your cash flow is heading. And that far out, almost 4 months out, is enough time to usually know that you need to make some changes so that you can either get out there and try to sell more, or put a little more pressure on those leads that have been hemming and hawing,
Hmm.
or cut somebody, which, like I said, we've only had to do once. And
Yeah.
then so that's a good tool. So we definitely are
That's on a
always.
weekly basis. So you'd fill out
Yes.
income on a week, anticipated income per week for the next
Yeah.
16 weeks, anticipated expenses per week for the next 16
Mhm.
weeks. You kind of looking for positives and negatives.
Yes.
Um, how does, with that, I would hope that businesses tend to have some money in the bank, but maybe this is a misunderstanding of mine. Um, how do you see that play out, practically? Is it actually, does it reflect, I mean, are you including the money in the bank when you're filling that out? It's cash flow. So you're,
Yes. Um, and that I'd have to bring her into this.
okay. Yeah.
She's very much the number person. So yes, she accounts for all of it. She accounts for how much reserve we might have that we could bring into it.
Hmm.
Uh, but that's only if we are if it becomes evident that we're not going to draw a profit for this quarter. We review we do a quarterly review where we assess our goals for the previous quarter, how well we did. We look at our finances to see where we are. We look at the projects that are in progress,
Hmm.
the revenue that's likely to be generated. We did do have tried to get a lot of our clients on managed services agreements to try to bring some consistency over time, especially for, like, our district
Right.
attorneys or our family resource centers, but also a number of our larger clients, try to get them on a monthly retainer. But we've learned a lot. We've made mistakes, realizing that, for instance, a lot of the software we build is on a platform that you have to buy licenses for. And we pay those licenses, and then we spread the cost over the year. If clients decides they want to pull out of the agreement and just say, let's go time and materials because things are tight, we still paid for their licenses like last month, and now we're having
Yeah.
to scramble. And so, and then thankfully our clients understand that. We've been able to work with them, but we have to suddenly, so now we've worked it out with agreements that, if you decide to change this, you then have to pay your licensing. Whatever we paid, you have to pay us up front. And so we live
Makes
and learn.
sense.
But having a peer group has been really a benefit, because you compare notes, and there's all
Hmm.
kinds of these peer groups for every industry, that where you commit to being, holding everything private and not letting it outside the group, but you share numbers, you share advice, you have online forums where you can compare notes. And so that's been
Yeah.
a real big help for us.
So, in your experience, and if this is going too deep, let me know. But I'm just curious. I love learning how different businesses function, and I know it's different for every industry. But in your experience, is there always, are you trying to keep a certain amount of money in the bank as padding, or is it because of the ups and downs of the way that the work flows? Is there like a negative months or weeks, and that's just kind of part of it?
Well, yeah, we do. Um, our goal is to have in the bank at least 6 months of of expenses and salary and stuff. We
Yeah.
don't always get there, so we might have 3 months. We've had times when it was like, if no money comes in, then we're gonna be bankrupt in a month.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that's been rare, and also you have the realization that we keep track of ongoing projects and what the potential
Mhm.
revenue is of managed services agreements, and so we know what our consistent expectation is for revenue coming in, and
Yeah.
so we just gauge the amount that we need to make sure we have in the bank to handle the ups and downs. So
Well,
and so
6 months
far,
sounds like a really safe number. So if you've got, let's say you've got that and you're looking at that 16-week cash flow manager spreadsheet and that looks negative, is your goal, I'm not going to touch this reserve? I'm going to act like this is going to be a zero? Or are you going to pull money out of the cash flow, kind of loan it to yourself and then put it back? What does that look like?
it's pretty fluid depending on the need and where we are with the business. Um, again, this is where my wife would be a much better
Okay.
person to interview. You'd probably found a lot of this stuff out from her.
Okay.
We're very much partners in just about
Yeah.
everything we do, and but she is definitely more disciplined. She has a greater sense of urgency about it. So I've been always kind of what's the Simon and Garfunkel song, "Feeling Groovy."
Yeah.
That's kind of always been my mantra. And my wife is very business-like, very business-minded, very fun-loving, thankfully. But yeah, when things look like they're getting tough, she just dives deep into the numbers and
Yeah.
these, we start asking clients, do you have another project? Do you have any referrals? Do we
Right.
things like that? Let's put another blog article up. You know, things like
Mhm.
that. So I like that.
Yeah. I mean, uh, that makes a lot of sense. Um, what value have you found in coaches? I mean, you've talked about the SCORE program, the Thrive program, the Michael Hyde's coaching program. Uh, Tell me more about that, the coaching side of things.
Sure. We had done the SCORE mentoring, and that carried us from starting the business through to planning and then hiring our first employee. And then that mentor, I think, retired or finally, we really didn't see him very often. And then as the business grew, we would reach out. We had an opportunity a couple of years ago to purchase a business that had an app that was similar to some that we have. It was a vertical market app. And the Small Business Administration, and I'm sure it's this way in most states, they'll partner with organizations that uh, can give you help. And the University of Alabama, their business school, has a group that helps small businesses and for all kinds of things. And so there's actually a group that who you can pay to come in and help value a business you're considering or value your business if you're wanting to sell. And if you go through the Small Business Administration, you get those services for free. And
Wow.
so
Okay.
their team took all the numbers we got and we just did everything, the due diligence, and realized that the owner of this business, who was a good friend of mine for many years, another developer, this was a pet project that I think that we just felt he was overpricing, and even though we did go back and forth, just in the end felt like it just wasn't the right timing to stretch ourselves that thin, and it was really the SBA program is really what helped us see that. It
Hmm.
put concrete numbers and projections and looked at our books and saw what we could afford, and we could have done it, but we're glad we didn't because it was that like a year later that things tightened up a bit.
Hmm.
Because COVID tightened up for everybody, but we didn't have to let anyone go. We survived that pretty well, and but this program was really helpful, and so we're we then joined Michael Hyatt because they were really big on goal setting and helping coach us into forming good daily rituals that feed into the business and our personal lives to balance the two. And that was, we did a year-long program with them, and we still use their full focus journal.
Yeah.
It's a great, great journal, and I've kept it. I used to do bullet journaling. You ever heard of that one?
Uh-huh.
Ryder Carroll, I think his name, because it fit me as somebody who doesn't like things to be too disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized I needed it, and this actually was an excellent program, so I'd highly recommend that.
Yeah, and that's where we met. I was in that
That's right.
business coaching program as well. I also still use the full focus planner myself, and I provide it for our team. And we do our every morning in our stand-ups, we could talk through our big three, which is kind of the foundation of that
Right.
planner is, what is the top three things to do this
Yeah, the
week, and then
weekly
what
big
is the top three
three, the
things to do
daily
this
big three.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
helps you
that's
stay
huge.
focused.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say it's revolutionary for me.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, I don't see how, really in every area of my life where I've been involved enough to get beyond the basics, like in running. I'm not a competitive runner. I did do a marathon last year. Don't know if I'll ever do it again. Toward the end of it, I was thinking runners are crazy. They're just inherently insane.
Yeah, I did a relay race. I did a Ragnar
Oh yeah.
10 years ago, and I had the shortest, longest, and steepest legs, and I was running the longest. I think it was 11 point something miles,
Yeah.
and I finished it, and I was like, I never need to do that again. I'm good.
Yes.
But some folks love it, so I totally
Yeah.
get that.
Yeah. I love it. I'm hoping to do a 50K next year, trail run, because trail is my love. But I'm not competing. I just want to be able to get places and see more things.
Yeah. So
But
hold on.
it's
So
that.
you ran a marathon, and you said these people are crazy, and now you're gonna go do.
The dirty secret of ultra running is that you hike a lot. Most of the uphills. Unless you're an elite.
Oh, okay. So
You
you're
know,
like walking, you're hiking rather than just
you
running. Is
run
that
the flats. You might run the downhills, but you hike a lot of the uphills.
okay?
I still do a lot of hill work because I just like being strong and being able to run some of those hills, but they're nowhere like where you are. We were out there in June and hiked some of the foothills outside of Fort Collins. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Just stunning.
anyway, but yeah, we learned that I learned the value of setting goals and setting daily goals in the run. I wouldn't have made the marathon if I hadn't followed a plan. And
Mm-hmm.
the coaches help. One, they've been through it already. They're running a business that's had some success, and they share their goals with you and how it worked. They help you spot pitfalls, potential pitfalls, help you stick with it.
Yeah.
And so I really am a believer in good coaching. You know,
So let's talk goals. I have got a love-hate relationship with goals myself. Um, how do you go about setting a good goal?
this you'll get different answers depending on who you talk to. One of my colleagues is a very focused person. He sets clear goals, but he also has really, really good metrics. He works really hard to figure out what it is he needs to track.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he sets his goals, they're usually stretch goals, but they have a good foundation of being able to break it down so he can see the things that move the needle. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And focus on those. So we do that to some degree, but I'm not nearly that disciplined. But I think the goals, I'm not, and this friend of mine is much more of a visionary than I am when it comes to just business goals. But so he pushes things that are more risky, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it keeps him focused, and he's done a great job. His company's probably 4 times bigger than mine, 4 or 5 times bigger, and he's gotten into some really big stuff. But that has its pitfalls too. But for us, we set annual goals and quarterly goals, and then we try to review those every quarter. We're about to do our Q4 or Q3 review and Q4 goal setting.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess for me, my wife, who looks deep at the numbers give you guardrails, I think. Um, so we set an ambitious goal when we were in the Michael Hyatt thing, and I think because of the timing of that, it did help us. It helped us focus some things that I think helped us get through. Um, you know, it helped us grow. It helped us improve our operations. But we did grow, but we fell short of what our goal was, and our goal was probably a little ambitious. Um, and so I think that it keeps something in front of you for you to
Yeah.
follow. And especially if you are good with metrics, you can watch the things that indicate whether you're headed in the right direction or not.
Yeah.
But um, again, my wife's a lot more disciplined than I am. So,
Well, what
but
you're describing is exactly the root of my love-hate
I'll set.
relationship with it. Is I think I tend to, because I'm more of a visionary, and so I'll set a
No,
big goal that I know is technically possible, you know, but not necessarily realistic.
I mean,
I think that's the part that's tough for me when I set one that's realistic. And I've definitely been over the years adjusting how I personally
right,
set goals. But the realistic ones are always much smaller than the ambitious ones. And
yes.
I hate not hitting goals.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. So you guys, it sounds like yours are based on the numbers
Oh,
and more about what is possible, what is realistic. Um, is that kind of how you go about it?
It is. I mean, you want a bit of a stretch at least to help, you know, motivate you to do better than what you're doing. But there's also, if you set it too ambitious, it could discourage you if you are
Mm-hmm.
regularly setting big goals and not meeting them. Now, if you're setting big goals that help you continue to move forward, I think that's a different thing because you can see the growth.
Yeah.
Um, One of the keys that I learned about goal setting, because when I say I'm not a visionary, um, maybe I should say I'm a dreamer,
Okay.
which doesn't always mesh with reality. Um, and so it has to be grounded in something. And one thing that really helped me years ago is I got on the Getting Things Done David Allen uh, productivity method
Okay.
years
I've not
ago.
heard of this. Tell me about it.
Yeah, GTD, you might have heard that acronym.
Mm-hmm.
OmniFocus, which is a great Mac app that partially was built to do GTD. It was something I use, but it's his practice is to think about everything, breaking it down to the point of being actionable. Michael Hyatt does too. I mean, his smarter goals, you have to define it so that you know what needs to be done in order to accomplish it. You can't just hope.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always my pitfall. Is I think I knew I could do it. I'd seen others doing something, but I didn't really know how, and I just assumed it would just come to me.
Yeah.
But the one thing about getting things done is everything that you do, the biggest goals, loftiest goals, down to I'm going to have friends over for barbecue this weekend, um, are ultimately have to be broken down to the next step. What is the next thing that I need to do in order to move this forward? I don't do the whole GTD system,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of the principles, and even people like Michael Hyatt's system and the bullet journal system have aspects of this. And so I think like everybody, we tailor things to our strengths and weaknesses. But that one principle of when I actually put something down on my to-do list for that day, it's not nebulous. I know it's a thing I can actually do. And then, the weekly review and the morning daily review, the weekly review, the quarterly review, all of those look at the higher goals, but they little by little break it down to things that can be done. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the key: is making it tangible, making it um, break it so that like if I get an hour, I had a meeting that got canceled last week, and that suddenly opened up an hour. And I knew because of the way I do these with the next thing that I had time and the opportunity and the motivation. I knew I could get 3 of these things done. in that
Yeah.
time and they were very actionable, very concrete. So I knew what to do, you see? And
Yeah, I
that
love
really
that.
helps you because then you can check off things you've really done. And then those add up to the weekly goal. And then those add up to the quarterly and then the annual. So that's really helped me is to at some point they have to become concrete, just
Hmm.
actionable. I would make nebulous goals, and they were good goals, but I just didn't always break them down to things that part of the way I learned the importance of checklists. I'm a big checklist person. Is when I was working for a small company, when I was in wastewater treatment, I did everything. It was a small engineering office. I did drafting, which with pencil on a drafting desk. And I did the computers, I did the field work, the lab work. I did so much, and were times when I had too much to do, and the only way I found to be able to move things forward was to keep to-do lists, and because then I would just say, okay, I'm going to read, I've got to redo this pipeline for page two, and so I knew that in order to do that, I had to do all these other things, and I would just make my checklist and check them off because at any moment I might be pulled away, and that's
Hmm.
been a real key. Checklists give me something concrete to see what I've done and what needs to be done. And so I do that in personal life and everything. If anything's complicated, anything's beyond 3 steps, I pretty much
Yeah.
write a to-do list.
Yeah. Checklists are a game changer. And, I really love what you're saying there on, what to do next. I found in our team meetings when we're planning out a sprint or a week or a day, I like to talk about what order do things need to happen in rather than what's the priority. Because if you're just talking priority, well, everything can be a high priority. Okay, well, what's actually next? Okay, and then what's after that? And so we'll take all of the tasks for that sprint or week, and we'll break it down and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for each individual. So to what you're saying is, you know, it applies there where they have that ability. Oh, I have a free moment. I don't have to start this free moment by figuring out what's next.
Yes,
I can
exactly.
just go look at that order of things and see where I've gotten done and what's next on the list, and it makes it very simple.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times we had a server that we needed to upgrade, and it was for a government department that had a website where all the government employees in the state had to fill out a form every year, the Statement of Economic Interest. So it's a heavily used website, but we needed to do something that required a reboot of the server, and so we had to make sure that we didn't mess up because it would lengthen the time that the website said we're down for maintenance, and we wanted to keep it up. And so my team who were involved, we created a very detailed checklist and assigned it and the order was really important. How do we
Mm-hmm.
organize this and who comes in when, so that if all goes well, then we will be done a lot quicker. And if it doesn't go well, then we have these contingencies. And it worked. It just worked so well that became a checklist for us doing that same maintenance on other servers. And so that was part of building that knowledge base, which we've not always been great with. I'm still seeking for a platform that I can record these kind of things better. We do it on Basecamp now, which does have a really nice checklist templating
Mm-hmm.
feature. And so that's where it is right now. So we have a few features, things we do on a regular basis, whether it be server maintenance or spinning up a new client. We have a checklist that's pretty detailed. That
And that
they're
saves a ton of
in-house
time down the road. You
a
don't have
lot of
to
time.
that. I mean, that if the first step is we have to figure this out, that's just going to take so much more time. You're more likely to miss things. When we build a website, we've got a master project template. We use a Asana, and it's based on years of us building websites. And then at the end of a website project, we'll look back and we'll say, hey, what went well and what went wrong? And we'll adjust the template to continue doing the things that went well, potentially do them better. But then anything that went wrong, we'll build in additional steps. And it's basically just a massive checklist, 2 to 3 month long checklist. But I think that those mistakes turn into, we add them in, we don't make those mistakes in the future. I think it's huge to have that checklist.
Yeah, that I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande.
No, I haven't.
He's a real top-notch physician, I think at Johns Hopkins, and he in his book he talks about how he came to see the value of checklists, and then he kind of gives a history of how healthcare adopted checklists in a lot of scenarios and how it drastically improves things, especially emergency room care. When you get somebody in there, there's this list that you go through that ensures that this person has a much higher outcome. And studies that have been done, just a simple checklist. I remember I learned about this when actually in the book when one of our employees at the iBank was in medical school, and he was doing emergency care at that time, and he had this checklist that when a new trauma patient comes in, they go through this checklist, and it was something like a huge number, a higher percentage that of those who go through the checklist or the patients who the doctor uses a checklist on are just so much higher probability that they're going to have a positive outcome. And it was the simple things like first get them breathing, find out if there's any obstruction. And you don't, I have an acquaintance who's lost some children in a bad car accident because they went to a hospital that was underfunded and it was very undisciplined. And they just, nobody thought, it was just an unfortunate event because they didn't have a checklist in their emergency room, So,
which, I mean, that, when you're stressed, your brain turns off.
Yes.
So you're, of course, you're not going to be thinking about things.
That's right.
Clearly. And I mean, in business, I think people get stressed, maybe the client's stressed and then they're changing how they interact with the team and that can stress the team out.
Yeah.
But even when you're not stressed, it's still easy to forget stuff.
That's right. When I used to travel in Africa with my bishop, I would always put together 3 copies of my travel journal. In a way, it wasn't really a journal, my information packet. And I would have everything needed every step of the way, from hotel reservations, the people I talked to, everything. But I knew that in any travel, things change. And especially, we used to tease TIA, this is Africa, when things would, because, just any travel you do internationally, things happen that you don't understand because it's a different culture.
Yeah.
And but I learned that if I could hammer down as many things as possible, then when something did happen, I knew what was needed, and we seemed to adapt quicker by having everything that I can have down on paper. Means that when something goes wrong, I have far fewer things that I don't know what's supposed to happen. It helped me recover, and so it really helped us sometimes and we would have just sometimes a lot of travel in multiple countries, big events that we were planning or participating in, and having everything I could down into checklists and documentation helped when the problems occurred. If everything went smoothly, there was no problem.
Right.
But
how often does that happen? I like that you said when the problems occurred, not if they occur.
Yes,
something's going to go wrong.
Exactly. So anyway, especially when I'm overseas, when you can't, like, I'm also used to be an avid backpacker, and I've gotten back into it a little bit over the years. And when I know I'm going to be in the woods for a week, I plan, because I can't just go to the Five and Dime and buy anything at the drugstore or the 7-Eleven to buy a bandage.
Yeah, you better have a good checklist when you're backpacking.
Yeah, and so complex projects are good that way, and things that are critical, checklists really help. Anyway, didn't mean to go on that rabbit trail, but
no, it's true. One thing I was thinking on the goals that I just learned recently is, do you know what WP Engine is? It's a website hosting platform. The guy who founded it, I think his name's Jason Cohen. I follow him on social media, and he put out this. He blogs all the time. Put out this article recently talking about growth, and it made me realize what I was getting wrong when I was setting goals, which was I was setting goals based on a percentage of growth. And he goes through in this article. I don't remember the title of it, but we'll put it in the show notes and I'll send it to you. He he goes through Facebook and Apple and these different, quote, exponential growth companies, and shows using the math and the numbers and their sales that there's actually no such thing as exponential growth. And that's the problem with setting growth based on a percentage, is technically that's exponential. If you're growing by 20% or 50% every year over a long period of time, that will become an exponential graph. But what he found looking at the revenue of the companies that have had, that perceived type of growth, is it's actually all linear. The way that they make it look exponential is by adding additional products or services. So each individual product has a linear graph of growth, and then they'll add a second product on after a certain number of years. That second product will also have a linear growth rate, but when it's stacked on top of the previous, the total revenue for the company now looks like it's growing by a steeper amount, because it is. And then they'll add a third product or service after a few years. And so this is kind of how they trick the the shareholders and stakeholders, stock market, into thinking it's exponential when it's not. So that's I haven't done. I just learned that maybe a month or two ago. I haven't done any goal setting with that in mind, but it really, the next time I do, I'm going to be setting goals linearly, you know, for the services that we offer. I think that was my big problem, was that percentage, and it turns out even the big companies don't grow at a percentage.
If you were wanting to achieve exponential growth and you understood that, I guess you would have to always be on the lookout for the next product or service that you could add to your business
That's
plan.
exactly right.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'd set a linear goal for what you currently do, but you'd break it down based on products or services. So each product or service would have a linear goal. So if you're starting off and you just have one, the growth of the company will be linear, and then you would be on the lookout, like you said, and you'd anticipate that one, generally speaking, being linear. Of course, the first year might be a little lower than the second year as you're launching it. Maybe it'd be higher. Um, but you'd break it down based on products and services, and then you'd want to hold yourself to that linear growth for each product or service.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, in the article, I found it hard to believe when I was in the beginning of the article, but he goes through all the math and
Hmm.
breaks down each of
So
these massive growth companies by product, and it's mind blowing.
I'll definitely look that up. Yeah,
Yeah,
send me the link.
okay, I'll send it to you.
WP Engine?
He founded WP Engine. I don't know that he's involved there anymore. I don't know what he's currently doing other than blogging. He just posts these really interesting, very data driven articles on a pretty regular basis. Thinks very differently, but because he's founded, uh, an exponential growth startup, in quotes, but because he founded it, because that's what WP Engine did, it kind of, there's a level of trust there. I always like to listen to people who did it.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And too many of us are dreamers.
Oh yeah, I think especially the founders and entrepreneurs, you have to be.
Yes.
I think you have to be a dreamer. I think the term I use is delusional optimism. It's not just optimism. You kind of live in that dream world just enough that you see how something that's not currently real could be, and that's part of what makes us want to start something or improve something. It's not fully based on reality.
Yes. Yeah, like with the old saying, you can please some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't
Yeah.
please all the people all the time.
Yeah.
I've heard that attributed to Lincoln, but I learned it from Captain Kangaroo
Right.
as a kid.
Yeah. That's a good nugget of wisdom. I mean, so how something like that? How have you done, constructed your business or your services to please some of the people rather than all of them?
That's a good question because there's always, it's a skill and an art of navigating all the different players in any project. So people come to us with a problem that a package solution doesn't solve. And because they either have a unique business, they have a unique approach to a business, their enterprise has some big system that their work group uh, doesn't fit into well, or they tried to, or it would cost them an exorbitant amount to have an Oracle programmer, come in there and add this feature that they want. And so they come to us because we build things that often integrate with these. We have a big healthcare network that we automate two of their departments, and we touch their corporate purchasing system. So, um, so to build what we built them, one runs, they own a huge printing company. And so we built the job management app for that, and it communicates with websites and where they get their stuff, their promotional products, their custom print stuff, or and then it interacts with the purchasing system, tosses it there, gets all the approvals, and it comes back into our system, and then puts it on the floor into the shop for production.
Wow.
And then and so that was a system that there are print production apps out there that are large, but they don't do quite what ours does. Their process is unique and it grows, and they have new ideas, and we're able to implement those. There's a lot of players though. You have to please IT, make sure that it's secure. Like we're wrestling now with an SSL certificate issue because of the nature of what we did for another client isn't working on their network because of the way their network's set up. So we have to weigh that, but ultimately, what I try to do is at the beginning of a project is try to put words to the need that, so let's just say the business owner has a vision and their current ERP system can't accommodate it. Like he has a vision for what field maintenance is going to look like. He wants to handle it a certain way, and their ERP system has a field maintenance module, but it's clunky and it's not adaptive, and he wants to do it a certain way. And so I tease out his idea and try to articulate it in a way that shows that I understood it, and then sort of like a light bulb. I love those moments where it's like, that's it, because he didn't have the words, or she didn't have the words for her business, and then it's a matter of just understanding the points you need to touch the other system, the capabilities of the APIs and things like that, and then you start building something that works for them. And so you're constantly and sometimes you're battling different people working for the same thing who have different visions, and that's always the harder. That's probably where the psychology degree and the proclivities in me that caused me to find psychology interesting might feed into, because you do have to balance it so that you can actually build something. I don't know if I've gone astray to your original question, but
well, so you're walking through kind of how you approach that, solving the customer's problem, which makes a lot of sense. But I'm sure that there's things that would be outside of what you'd actually do. How do you make that decision about, this is something we don't do and won't do for this client, versus we're just going to do anything that they need?
Budget is a good determiner. So if there's something like we have all the time. A client will have an idea that's a really good idea, but it involves some very costly, time-consuming development, and so we'll just talk about their budget. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the projects that to me that are the ones I least like are the ones that end up stalling and never really coming to fruition. And a
Yeah.
lot of times it's because somebody overreached. And
Mm.
I try to see those times. But talking budget is actually one way of bringing people back down to the ground. It's good to have the vision, but if it can't be implemented, it's not a good idea. You know,
Yeah.
um, not a lot of people have an infinite budgets. Um, so um, sometimes sometimes I'll have to stall uh, the client a little bit when they want to pursue a direction that I really just in my gut know is going to be very time consuming. It's going to end up being very costly, and sometimes I feel like Steve Jobs used to say, "You don't give people what they want. You you te- no, you don't give people what they ask for. You give them what you know they want."
Mm.
That's not the way he said it, but he often a lot of one of the geniuses of Steve Jobs is he envisioned things that he knew would meet a need or a desire that didn't exist. And
Yeah.
he had the vision, and the iPad was one of the great examples, I think, because when it came out, even though I'm an old Mac bigot, and um, I looked at that thing and thought, I just don't get this.
Me too.
My
Yep.
laptop's not much heavier. My
I've
phone
got a
is
phone. I've got a laptop. What do I need this thing for?
exactly. And now, I mean, I love my iPad. I mean, right now
Mm.
I've got my iPad mini attached to my computer where I have a list of things that I thought if you brought up, then these are some of, the projects and clients and things that we've built.
Nice.
And it's just an extension of, I plug it into my Mac and boom, there it is. It's an extension to my Mac.
Yeah.
I love it for reading. I love it for, you know, just all kinds of things. With an Apple Pencil, you can sketch prototypes and then bring them over and put them on top of like Affinity Designer or something to
Hmm.
flesh it out more.
Yeah. Super
Because
useful.
it is, it is. It's like the pad of paper that you always have with you.
Yeah.
Viral notebook, the moleskin.
Hmm.
So he saw something that no one else did. So, and that
Yeah. It's
sometimes
like the Henry Ford quote. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses.
that's exactly right. And there
Yeah.
are those times when you tell a client that this isn't going to work, that they suddenly get it or are willing to give you
Hmm.
the benefit of the doubt, and you build it and you just nail it. But
Hmm.
it's always in collaboration. You have to make sure and constantly ensure that you have the vision clear and that you're meeting that. And that's a challenge, but also it's the high when that happens. When a client, you know, writes to you out of the blue and says, I just really enjoy working in this software. That's the pinnacle
That's awesome.
of meeting the goal. It doesn't always happen, but it does happen often enough to make it worth it and to make that a goal.
Hmm.
Sometimes the work they do is boring and they don't like it, but they want to do it more efficiently.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
Huh. Well, a question I had from earlier was when we were talking about budget, going back there, you mentioned that you've got the 6 months in reserves. How long, from when you were starting, when you didn't have that, how long did it take to have that in the bank, to build that up?
a while, it first started with just having some surplus so we could get through the normal cyclical downturns. Every
Hmm.
business has these, and so we just wanted enough that if we had a tight month or if a project stalled, we wanted to know we could sail through it. And so we did, and it worked. We've almost always brought in more than we let out.
Yeah.
But as we've gotten bigger, and also the nature of the projects, we've also had learned, like the managed services agreements, of getting a consistent flow of income. We've had to learn how to, well, one, to, we we're not an IBM. We're not a, one of a big corporation that has just all these people looking at the ways to measure everything. But we have really good relationships with our clients. And we're very interactive with our clients. It's the way we raised our kids. We're very interactive with our kids. There's very little that we hid from our kids. We let them, a lot of people, I know of a lot of people who grow up in church and their parents keep hidden the things that go wrong in church, which is common in any organization.
Mm-hmm.
And other than private stuff that you ought to hide, we just acknowledge to our kids that, sometimes crap happens,
Right, because if you hide it, you're not actually teaching them how to deal with it. So they're going to find out eventually.
Right.
And if they never learned how to roll with it,
that's right.
Then it's
so
more of a crisis to them.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it, because they've seen us roll with it.
Yeah.
And it's not all us, but in business, then we try to be open with our clients. So if we come to them and we've got a managed services agreement that they really don't have to give us more money, but we're finding that we're spending more time than we anticipated, then we just say, can we talk about this? And I can't think of a single client that's pushed against us.
Wow.
Usually they'll work for us, or they'll work with us to bring the scope down, like, let's just take this section and do time and materials, but the rest will kind of keep this even keel. So we might lower the monthly managed service agreement, but also certain work is outside of that will be time and materials. So it's just a relationship. We're really big on relationship. And we have some clients that just call us now, some of our older clients that just call us to say, hey, see how we're doing, send cards. My wife's mother passed away, baskets of fruit. I mean, we have a client in DC that their company does defense and security training all over the world. And we've had such fruitful relationship with them and a number of companies in the same industry that they sent us a beautiful fruit basket,
Wow.
and called us to see how we were doing. Really just, we like doing business that way,
Yeah.
You can't be friends with everybody, but it's good to have a good relationship, that human connection. It's more than just, the one phrase I hate is people saying it's just business. Usually they say that after they've done something that they know is probably cold and in poor taste. And, it's not just business. It's, it's life, You want I think of Fezziwig in is it the Christmas Carol? Fezziwig, the guy, the employer who Scrooge worked for when he was younger and was happy and was in love with the girl who he ended up not getting, because he was too bent on making his money.
Yeah.
Fezziwig was a successful businessman, but not a billionaire, but he knew how to enjoy his family and friends and neighbors. I think about that sometimes.
Yeah, but he had enough, and yep.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, and that reminds me of what you said earlier about how we, as business owners, we have a responsibility to our employees as well.
Yeah.
And it is not just business, it is their life. It's how they feed their families and pay their bills.
Yeah.
And I think that extends, to them and, well beyond just the clients and potential partnerships and things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, on your list, was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered here?
We've ranged widely.
Yeah.
One of the things, just looking at my list, we've often had coaches encourage us to take one of our lines of business and really focus on it, because it might have a potential to be bigger and more profitable. And I agree that's probably the case, but just me personally, I love the variety. There was one day kind of illustrates the type of variety we have in our portfolio. I was in the morning. I was up in the tower of or the unit of a power plant, the largest power plant in Alabama, the largest non-nuclear, and we did a regulatory compliance app. and that where they would go out in the field and they would track certain things. And then later that day, I was at the Children's Hospital and with a bunch of doctors talking about an outcomes app that took their stuff and allowed them to enter it and see it in a way that facilitated better outcomes that their electronic records program just didn't offer. And then I was at the district attorney's office meeting them about the software we built for them. And then I was on a conference call with a company that sells Bible software. They have one of the Bible apps. And we were talking about some project that we expanded for them over the years. And that's the diversity, from the power plant to the DA's office to the children's hospital to the Bible software vendor.
Wow.
And I love applying software to the different industries, and it feeds into itself. It because it gives you more experience in solving problems. So when a client hits a problem that's similar to one, we were always borrowing code from one project to another.
Yeah.
And it just keeps it interesting,
And that's can't be overlooked, because you have to. Well, you don't have to, but I guess probably want to enjoy what you're doing.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the benefits of, being the business owner, is you get to build a business that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's diversity, then great. I feel the same way. We haven't niched down into a certain industry for the same reason. We typically do the writing and the design. And we'll get clients who show up and they'll see one of the websites in our portfolio and they'll say, I want something just like that. And that's great. But if we were writing, for lawyers over and over and over and over,
yeah,
there's kind of this I don't want them to feel like they all got the same website,
right?
Or they have the same ads that are running. But I do like that, learning from one, applying it to another. Oh, this worked here. Let's try it here.
That's right.
I think that's great, and I think it keeps us sharp.
You're right. Exactly.
A little more creative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the different people you work with too. It's just really fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and I've been fascinated over the years because we just somehow attract really great people, and I've just loved the majority of our clients and the work we do, and I think it's interesting. I've never quite figured that one out, of how that happens, but I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree.
Well, thanks for the conversation today, Scott. This has been great. So let's say somebody needs some software development done. How do they find you?
Our website is mossrock.com, mossrock.com, and our phone number is there, and they can email me, Scott, SCOTT, at mossrock.com.
Okay.
And we'd love to, we can assess things. We have had people come to us about things that, I always ask a lot of questions. It's a gift and a curse. But I like to just know what I'm going into and make sure we're the right fit. I mean, I've had prospects come to us, and then with the initial assessment, I realize that there's a piece of software out there that already does it. And so I'll recommend that they check that out first. And I've had clients who did that and then came back to me and said, well, that was nice, but it's a few key things I really want. I'd still like to take the custom route. And so it's more expensive up front, but it does often give you something that fits much better. And so, if you call, be ready for a lot of questions. The two types that often come to us and become clients are ones, first of all, people who have a puzzle to solve for they have a need, a pain point that sometimes they've researched it and have an idea of a direction. I've had clients come to us with practically a sketched out mock-up, and then I've had clients who just knew they had a problem, that there got to be an answer, and they have no clue of where to even begin. And then so it's our job to kind of come alongside them and help them ask the right questions so they can assess their need that can then become a real piece of software that solves their problem. And we've had really good success with both clients. The ones who have a clear vision, we build what they want, bring our expertise where, say, maybe their vision didn't take account of this. I'm notorious for spotting exceptions, which sometimes frustrates people, but it's like I can kind of, because of my experience, I've been doing it over 30 years, I can see when this is going to be a problem for either user interaction or their use case, So anyway, a lot of questions, very interactive.
Okay.
So you
and so folks come to you when there's an app out there that's close to what they need, but not quite, or if they have some level of inefficiency in their processes, like they're spending too much time in spreadsheets or something, you can kind of help them out. Is that basically, how would you describe the problems you solve, what you do?
How I would describe it?
Yeah.
We solve real business problems using custom software and integrations. There's always a real problem. And occasionally we had, like the Bible software company, they sold the company. We established a good relationship with the new owners, but he had already owned a publishing company and wanted to use their software. But the one thing that we had spent a lot of time building into our app was the royalties in software, like software publishing, especially like Bible software. You have so many contributors to the tools that you use for Bible study, and they attract. They're really big in the developing world, or the majority world, I think they call it now. And a lot of seminarians, a lot of pastors and people use their tools. And so he found that our software we had really nailed the royalty tracking. Mm-hmm. And so what he decided to do was he used his other publishing platform because there was enough similarity, selling books, whether it's electronic or physical. But the royalty tracking he kept in ours. And so we helped get to where he could bring his stuff easily over into our system, and it would calculate the royalties. And it's highly fluid. You could have a sale that you forgot to apply, and it would go tell you every sale that it would have applied to, and you can choose whether you want to offer a credit or adjust your royalties or whatever. And we really nailed it with that feature. And so he's using a piece of it that's still extremely valuable to him. And so that happens occasionally, not that often, but occasionally, and it's rewarding when it does.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because anyway,
cool.
As you can probably tell, I can go on and on, so be careful.
Yeah, no, well, this has been great. I know that you've got stuff you got to get to, and I do as well.
Yes.
So mossrock.com for any custom development project, and you'll make sure it's a good fit before just selling them on something that wouldn't work. And I think that everybody appreciates that.
My pleasure. And Alexander, it's been great talking to you again.
Yeah,
always
you too.
enjoyed working with you, and maybe talk to you some more in the future.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Clear Brand Marketing Podcast. If you need help with your website or marketing, go to clearbrand.com. You can schedule a free strategy call with one of our consultants, or take advantage of our free resources to help you write, design, or implement a better website marketing.